Imagine you're lost, alone, with a broken leg in the middle of a dense, unforgiving wilderness. The sun is setting, temperatures are dropping, and the sounds of the night are beginning to surround you. What do you do? Do you have the will, the knowledge, the sheer grit to survive? Today, we're diving into a story that puts that very question to the ultimate test. This isn't a hypothetical scenario. It asks the incredible true story of a man who faced the abyss and refused to let it swallow him. Our story begins with Joe Simpson and his climbing partner, Simon Yates, two ambitious young British mountaineers. In 1985, they set their sights on a treacherous, unclimbed peak in the Peruvian Andes, the west face of Siula Grande. This wasn't just a mountain. It was a 21,000-foot monster of ice, snow, and rock, a challenge that had defeated everyone who had tried it before. They were skilled, they were determined, and they were about to achieve the impossible. After a grueling multi-day ascent, they reached the summit. The feeling must have been pure euphoria, standing on top of the world, having conquered the unconquerable. But as any experienced mountaineer will tell you, reaching the summit is only half the battle. The descent is often the most dangerous part. Exhausted, and with a storm brewing, they began their journey back down. And that's when disaster struck. In a split second, Joe slipped on an ice cliff and fell, his leg shattering with a sickening crack. The tibia bone in his lower leg was driven up through his knee joint. The pain was excruciating, unimaginable. In the remote, freezing wilderness of the Andes, a broken leg is a death sentence. He was completely immobilized. Simon, his partner, was now faced with an impossible choice. He was tied to Joe by a 300-foot rope. He couldn't leave him, but he also couldn't carry him down the treacherous terrain alone, especially with the storm closing in. Their situation was beyond desperate. But Simon came up with a risky, agonizing plan. He would lower Joe 300 feet down the mountain on the rope, then climb down to him and repeat the process. It was slow, painful, and exhausting for both men. For hours, in the howling wind and blinding snow, they descended this way, inch by agonizing inch. Joe was in constant, blinding pain, swinging uncontrollably against the ice face. Then, the situation went from catastrophic to impossible. As Simon was lowering Joe down another 300-foot section, he unknowingly lowered him over the edge of a massive, hidden crevasse, a deep, dark chasm in the ice. Joe was left dangling in mid-air, a dead weight on the rope, unable to climb up or touch any surface to take the weight off. Simon, far above and unable to see or hear Joe in the storm, felt the rope go tight. He held on with all his strength, his body slowly being pulled off the mountain by Joe's weight. For over an hour, Simon held on, screaming Joe's name into the blizzard, the rope cutting into his hands, his energy draining away in the freezing cold. He knew the snow seat he was on was collapsing. He was being pulled to his own death. He knew if he didn't do something, they would both perish. He was faced with the most horrific decision a person could ever make. He had to cut the rope. With a heavy heart and a frozen knife, Simon cut the rope connecting him to his friend. Joe plummeted into the darkness of the crevasse. Simon, grief-stricken and believing Joe was gone, managed to dig a snow cave and survive the night. The next day, he continued his descent, racked with guilt but focused on his own survival. But Joe wasn't dead. Miraculously, his fall was broken by a snow bridge deep inside the crevasse. He was alive, but his situation was even more hopeless. He was trapped in a glacial tomb, with a shattered leg, no food, no water, and no way out. He knew Simon thought he was dead. No one was coming for him. This was it. This was the end. Most people would have given up right there. They would have accepted their fate and waited for the inevitable. But not Joe Simpson. Something inside him, a primal instinct for survival, refused to quit. He looked at his options. Stay here and die for certain, or try to do the impossible. He chose the impossible. He realized the only way out was to go further down into the crevasse, hoping to find another exit. He lowered himself deeper into the blackness, eventually finding a small opening leading out onto the glacier below. He was out of the crevasse, but he was still miles from base camp, across a treacherous glacier littered with more crevasses. His leg was a mangled mess of bone and flesh. He couldn't walk, so he began to crawl. For 3.5 days, Joe Simpson crawled. He crawled over miles of ice, rock, and snow. He had no food. He survived by eating snow, which barely quenched his thirst and lowered his body temperature even further. Every movement was agony. The pain from his leg was constant and searing. He was hallucinating from dehydration and exhaustion. He heard voices, Boney M's Brown Girl in the Ring, playing on an endless loop in his head. It was a descent into madness. But through it all, one thought kept him going. I've got to get back. He set small goals for himself. Crawl to that rock, then the next one. He was literally dragging his broken body across a glacier, one painful inch at a time, refusing to die. He finally reached the moraine, a chaotic jumble of rocks at the edge of the glacier, which was even more difficult to cross. He was delirious, emaciated, and close to death. He had crawled for nearly 6 miles. Finally, dehydrated and on the brink of giving up, he saw it, the flicker of a light. The base camp tent. He was just a few hundred yards away. Summoning his last ounce of strength, he crawled towards it and started yelling into the night. Back at the camp, Simon Yates and a backpacker who was looking after their gear had already started burning their spare clothes, convinced Joe was gone and preparing to leave. They heard a faint cry. At first, they dismissed it as the wind, but then they heard it again. Rushing out, they found Joe, just hours from death. He was barely recognizable, a broken, frost-bitten skeleton of a man, but he was alive. His survival was nothing short of a medical and psychological miracle. He had endured 6 surgeries and months of recovery, but went on to climb again. Joe Simpson's story, which he detailed in his book, Touching the Void, is one of the most powerful survival tales ever told. It's a raw, honest look at the brutal realities of mountaineering and the impossible choices people are forced to make. It's also an incredible testament to the power of the human spirit. It shows us that even when everything is lost, when you're dangling over the abyss or trapped at the bottom of it, there is a strength inside us that we rarely know we have. It's a story about resilience, the will to live, and the sheer, stubborn refusal to give up. Thank you so much for watching. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more incredible true stories. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think you would have done in that situation? Until next time, stay safe and keep exploring.